podcast listener. If you're sick of playing small in life and want to transition to a bolder, better you, you're in the right place. I'm Kimberly Rich, and this is the Bold Life Movement podcast. From business, money, marketing, and systems, to spirituality, self-love, creativity, and personal growth, each week, the Bold Life Movement will bring you inspiring stories from real people. Learn from successful entrepreneurs, innovators, best-selling authors, and creators, and leverage your own inner boldness to create an unconventional and truly rich life. Welcome back to episode number 46 of the Bold Life Movement podcast. I'm your host, Kimberly Rich, and this week I have with me Geoff Woods. Geoff is the host of the Mentee podcast, and after hearing the Jim Rohn quote that you are the average of the 5 people you spend the most time with, Geoff set out on a mission to surround himself with high-level CEOs and successful entrepreneurs. Fast forward just 10 months, Geoff went from sales rep to CEO, partnering up with the co-authors of the best-selling book, The One Thing, to launch a new media company that hopes to disrupt the education system. Geoff has been featured in entrepreneur.com and is an expert in creating quality content and turning it into massive income streams. He's a really great example of what is possible when you surround yourself with the right people. Today we dive in deep, and I have to say it was one of the more emotional interviews for me because Geoff and I just both really resonate with the fact that mentors can really change your life. So I won't waste any more of your time. Let's go ahead and dive in with the one and only Geoff Woods. Geoff, thanks so much for coming on. I'm really happy to get to connect with you again and share your story with my listeners. So thanks for coming.
I appreciate it, Kim.
Yeah, so I want to start off by giving people a little bit of a backstory. Obviously, they can go listen to the Mentee podcast and start from the beginning, but let's try and sum it up a little. 2014, you hear one of Jim Rohn's famous quotes about the top 5 people that you spend your time with being the people that influence you the most. So how did that lead you into starting the Mentee podcast, and what was your initial intention behind it?
Well, you have to go back even further.
Okay.
Because I was in medical device sales for 5 years, which was an awesome job. I wore scrubs every day. I ran through hospitals. I sold a device that actually saved lives and got to make a really good living on top of it. So life's great. But I don't know how many of your listeners are in this situation where they're in a place in their career where maybe they're satisfied, maybe not, but deep down, they know they're meant for more. That's where I was. I knew my goal was to one day waking up, owning a business that made a massive impact in the world and also provided real financial security for my family. But here I am with this awesome, cushy job. People mistakenly call me McDreamy or doctor, and I don't correct them. Life's good.
I love that you admitted that.
But I didn't have a compelling reason to make a change. There wasn't enough pain in my life that forced me to make a change, which is the truth.
Yeah.
Then 2 things happen. First, a colleague of mine has a stroke, and at the time, he's only 35 years old.
Whoa.
Amy, my wife, and I had just bought a house in Orange County, and we had just had our first child. So now I've got real responsibilities, and I recognize if something happens to me, my wife has to be the sole provider for our household. She's a stay-at-home mom. That's not going to happen. So that's very unsettling. The next week, my company slashes my income by 40%. Literally back to back.
Wow.
That's when things get ugly. And month after month, we are hemorrhaging cash. It gets to the point that we almost ran out of money. And I'm going, okay, how am I going to pay the mortgage? How am I going to put food on the table? For anybody who's listening to this who is really ambitious, who considers themselves to be an alpha, then we're the same.
Yeah, that's not an okay place to be in.
No, and it challenged my identity as a man and as a provider. Like, I tear up at times just the emotions from that time in my life were so intense. Like, that was the pain that I needed that compelled me to move forward. And I choose my words carefully as I describe this. It compelled me to move forward.
Yeah.
That's when I heard the Jim Rohn quote, "You're the average of the 5 people you spend the most time with." I look at my 5. Go, amazing people, love them, they'll always be in my life. But are they business owners who wake up every day making an impact in the world, delivering true financial security to their family? Not a single one of them was.
And you knew at that time that being a business owner was something that you aspired to, or was just necessary for the lifestyle that you hope to have?
At the time, I perceived that's what I wanted. Now that I have gotten into that, I have validated that that is true. But it was very clear. It was just so black and white. If I want to have those things, I can take the easy road or the hard road. Most people are offered this choice every day, and they don't realize they're choosing the hard road, which is setting a goal, setting a plan, and figuring out how to get it done. You're literally waking up every day and guessing. That's the hard way versus the easy way, which is get clear on what you want, meet the people who already do it, and let them tell you what to do.
Yeah, I feel like so many people skip step one, which is just getting clear on what it is that you want. And they're just content to like accept the status quo and accept what the life is that they have.
Well, and the reality is, I know all the questions that's going off in the listener's head right now, which is, well, what if I don't know what it is that I want?
How do you figure it out?
You don't need the clarity on what the actual thing is. At the time, I thought it was getting into real estate investing as a career. But
that's more of the how.
Correct. Well, you attach yourself to some outcome. The point is, I started surrounding myself with those people. In the process, learned I have zero business being a professional real estate investor. I'll always invest in real estate, but that won't be my career.
Yeah.
And then I just kept surrounding myself with people who inspired me and ultimately led me to going from employee to entrepreneur in 10 months.
So take me back to the podcast.
Yeah.
Go.
So here, I get the clarity that I need to upgrade my 5. And I leverage my natural sales ability to surround myself with some incredibly heavy hitters very fast. And it was a night before an event that I'm sharing with a group of guys sitting around the pool, smoking cigars and drinking cocktails. Like, these are the guys that I've surrounded myself with. They go, dude, you need to start a podcast. That's incredible.
Oh, wow.
And it was at that moment that I went, you know what? You're right. I don't really know how to start a podcast. I don't know why I would start a podcast. I don't know how it would benefit me, but I know it would add value to people because I'm running with a group of guys that, frankly, I pinch myself that I even get to talk to them. So if I could just record those private conversations and share them with the world, I'd add value and it would probably help open some doors for me. That's all I knew. And then I ran through walls.
So when you first launched it, though, you hadn't yet connected with Jay and Gary, right?
No.
So how did that look when you originally launched? What was like the concept of the weekly interviews, and who were you thinking would be your mentors at that time?
So at that time, I already had a core group of mentors.
Okay, you've already up-leveled a bit.
That's what it was. I was 4 months in. I was already running with the guy who was Tony Robbins' right-hand man as his executive vice president. He took Tony's business through the roof. He scaled Gateway Computers from 0 to 11 billion. I had already surrounded myself with a guy who was an executive for a Fortune 500 company. Like, I already had some really heavy hitters as my personal mentors.
And how did you connect with them? This is probably the biggest question going off in the listener's head right now.
Yeah, well, 2 ways. One is, have you ever heard of 6 degrees of separation?
Uh-huh.
Yeah. It's the idea that you can be connected to anybody in the world through just 6 connections.
Yeah. Right now, I'm 1 degree from every biggest mentor that I've ever thought of. It's crazy.
See? Yeah. I'd argue with the internet these days, it gets even more compressed, and you're evidence of that, Kim.
Totally.
First, it starts with getting that clarity on what it is that you want. Can we role play this live with you?
Yeah. Yeah.
Have I? Okay. So your reaction.
I don't know about this flipping the tables thing, but yeah, let's do it.
Yeah, it's good. Out of everything you're working on right now, where do you need help most right now?
Oh, I think knowing what to offload, knowing where to like let go, because I'm trying to do too much on my own.
Okay.
So like business management, I think.
Okay. Delegation, automation, systemization, operations.
Yeah.
If you had to describe the ideal person who could guide you in just 1 to 2 sentences, how would you describe them?
I would say someone who is systems oriented and measures things, tracks things.
Okay, cool. So basically, here's the reason I walked you through this, and I did this for everybody else, because this is literally what I went through. I said, okay, I need to upgrade my 5. I need to find mentors. Well, first, where do I need help? And the reason I ask that question is because a mentor serves you best in their area of expertise.
Yeah.
You don't go to somebody who's a master of stocks and ask for real estate advice. You don't go to somebody who's a master real estate investor and ask them how you create content for a podcast.
Right.
You get clarity on what it is you want. You need help with operations and systemization. You're looking to surround yourself with people who have an amazing ability to step into business and drive efficiency through systemization.
Yeah. It's
okay,
something
cool.
that's actually been on my mind a lot lately because I realize that I don't want to be doing the stuff I'm not good at anymore.
Yeah.
I want to be doing the stuff that I am, obviously.
Yeah. Well, okay, so here's why we get clarity in this, and this is where the 6 degrees of separation come into play. When you say that to me, and when you say that to every single person who just listened to this, a few things happen. Number one, we all thought, do I know somebody who fits that mold? So either A, I am that guy, B, I know that guy, or C, maybe I'm not him or her. I don't know them, but what you've done is you've planted a seed in my mind.
So now you're looking, now you're scanning.
And every day while I meet new people, should I suddenly meet that person, a light bulb will go off and I'll go, oh man, maybe I should consider making that connection.
Yeah. I think one thing that's really good to point out here is you and I are both natural connectors. And I think that it's important to be a connector so that you attract other connectors. Because if you're someone who would never think to help someone else out, likely you're not going to bring people into your life who can do that for you.
Okay, so you need to remind me to tell a story on that because it is so powerful.
Okay.
But I just want to do the proof that this stuff works.
Finish the exercise, please.
I had no idea that that's where you needed help most. I happen to know the exact guy. His name's Tim Francis. He has a company called Profit Factory. If you go to profitfactory.com, he has been written up in all the magazines. He's brought into businesses to drive systemization. He has delivered millions of dollars to the bottom line of businesses, and he's a rock star. And we were grabbing cocktails just a few weeks ago.
Oh, local.
So no, he's actually in Canada.
Oh,
but
okay.
I will connect you, and you should interview him for the show and use yourself as the case study.
Done.
So
you're giving me chills, Jeff.
So you need to send me an email after this to remind me to make that connection. Okay.
Deal.
People who are listening to this was not. Did I prep you for this?
No, not scripted.
No. And if you actually did research on who this guy is, you'd realize I am connecting you with just about as good as it gets.
Thank you.
You got cleared on what you wanted, and you just shared it.
I already feel like you're mentoring me, whether or not you realize it.
I do.
Okay.
But this is the point, right? I've gotten good at this, and it's not that hard. Yeah. And I don't say that to undermine the challenge that is ahead of some of you, but the reality is extraordinary results is not hard. You know, on the cover of The One Thing, it says it's the surprisingly simple truth behind extraordinary results. It's just about execution, folks. It's just about doing it.
Yeah.
Get the clarity and start telling people what you're looking for.
So did we cover how you were connecting with your top 5 back then?
No. So there was a story about being a super connector,
yes.
Right?
Yeah.
And this is also how top 5 to me, partnering with Gary Keller and Jay Papasan with The One Thing. A month after I launched the podcast, it's our national sales meeting for my medical device sales company. Imagine walking into a ballroom, hundreds of chairs, and on every single chair is this white book, The One Thing. They bought a copy of the book for everybody in the company. I've never heard of it. I don't know what it is, but I sit down and I go, cool looking cover. They bought it for everybody. It must be good. The co-author, Jay Papasan, walks out on stage to give the keynote address. And he proceeds over the next hour to blow my freaking mind. How do you get more done? By actually doing less. What are the surprisingly simple truth behind extraordinary results? How can you identify the one thing in your life such that by doing it makes everything else easier or unnecessary? So I'm in the back row thinking, I need to upgrade my 5. This guy's awesome. I need to know him.
Yeah.
But then all these limiting beliefs enter my mind. Why would he talk to me? What could I possibly say that would make him interested in me? What could I give him that would make it worth my time? All these things. They were all
sure you're not the only one.
No, everybody goes through that.
Yeah.
He finishes his speech. The whole company erupts out of the chair, standing ovation. I realize this is my moment. I have to go talk to him now. So while everybody else is sitting down, my ass is out of the seat, running down the side of the room to tackle him. When I approached him, I simply said, Jay, my name's Geoff Woods. First and foremost, thank you. Your speech absolutely blew me away. I just launched this podcast. I don't have a big following, but I have to share you with my audience. Can we line up an interview? He said yes.
Interesting thing about asking for the interview up front. I often talk about waiting to make an ask until later, but I noticed that the way that you positioned it was adding value to him, like sharing his message, his book with your audience, not you getting to interview him.
Bingo. Because make no mistake about it, I have no idea how many downloads you get. You could get 50,000 an episode. You could get 50 an episode. Bottom line is, when you asked if you wanted to interview me, you have a perceived platform in my mind.
Right.
It's value. Period.
Right.
Period.
So what about people who don't have a platform like you and I have, and don't have an easy offering to give someone who they want to connect with? How do you make that transition?
Let's table it. Ask me that right after this.
Okay.
So I interviewed Jay. After the interview, I asked him a simple question. What are you working on, and where do you need help most right now? How can I help you?
How do you get yourself in the mindset to feel capable of asking that kind of question? Because I think a lot of listeners would think, how could I help them? He knows how to do everything that I want to do. How could I help?
That's a limiting belief.
Right. How do you get past it?
Do it.
How do you get
the reason I started doing it is because I got in the room with some really successful people, and I noticed that the most successful people showed up to give, not to get. I noticed, it struck me so hard, that the most successful people were constantly going out of their way to add value to other people. I just took that and embodied it. It's who I am now in my bones, that I legitimately wake up every single day, every human interaction I have, subconsciously now, I am wondering, how can I help this person? Sometimes I didn't know that you were looking for help with streamlining and automation. I don't have a freaking crystal ball in front of me, so I don't pretend like it. I simply ask, what are you working on? How can I help you? And you told me, and I can help you actually. So folks, you got to just do it. And this is the entire culture of the Mentee podcast. The people who really follow me, they embody this, and their lives are changed. Because it's that simple. You become a person who goes out of your way to add value. People will go out of their way to be in relationship with you.
I think that's part of being the super connector.
Bingo.
Yeah.
Absolutely. That's all it is. So in this, that plays perfectly. Because when I asked Jay that question, he said, we're always looking for more exposure for the book. At the time, I didn't have anything else for him, but I filed it away. I planted the seed. As my podcast started to blow up, as I started getting featured in Entrepreneur and started writing for them, I started plugging Jay. I started getting him booked on other podcasts. I started writing articles in Entrepreneur about productivity and the one thing, adding value, connecting him with other listeners and readers. Then I saw him sharing a tweet of mine, and I simply retweeted back to him and said, what are you working on? How can I help you? Again, coming from value.
Yeah.
And he said, Gary and I are looking for a CEO for a publishing company. I said, I know 3 to 5 people who could be an amazing fit. Let's talk so I can connect you with the right one. Again, trying to play super connector, trying to add value.
Yeah. And it's not like you're reinventing the wheel. You just asked him the same question that you had asked the time before.
Again and again and again. Yeah. And that's when we got on the phone and he told me what they were looking for. That's when I realized it wasn't the guys I was thinking of. It was me. And I threw my name in the hat, and now I run the company.
So let's backtrack just a little bit.
You're
at the medical sales job. They cut your income. You start the podcast. How do you transition from employee to entrepreneur? What does that look like?
It looks like me, first and foremost, getting as focused as possible during the day on my medical job. How can I be as efficient as possible and effective as possible so I can get twice as much done in half the time?
Because you made your own schedule?
Correct.
Okay, gotcha.
And even for employees who don't make their own schedule, you have certain things you need to get done. How can you compress the amount of work you get done so you can free up extra hours?
Yeah. totally.
And then I started working the late nights and the early mornings on the podcast, scaling that into a business. In the process of doing that, I turned it into a six-figure business. I learned how to create content, build a tribe, systemize, automate, and monetize.
So for people who aren't familiar with information products and things like that, will you briefly just describe like what is a six-figure business that comes from a podcast? What does that look like?
Well, the podcast is just the front end. Right. It's just a way for you to get to know, like, and trust me. And then a certain number of you will opt into my email list. And then a certain number of you will choose to buy a course on how to find seven-figure mentors. A certain number of you will join what I call the inner circle, which is my family of people who are the people that you want to connect with. I've already curated it. Like a certain number of people will want consulting or coaching. And it just, all of a sudden it's 6 figures a year.
Leveraging
Boom.
that super connector power.
Yeah, absolutely.
To create products. Why not?
But when I threw my name in the hat for Jay and Gary to be their CEO, it was the fact that I had already started a podcast. I already learned how to monetize. I already learned how to do these things. That's what qualified me. So ultimately, I got offered the job. I quit my medical job, and that was from the time I started the podcast to quitting the job was 10 months. And now I'm a full-time entrepreneur partnered up with the guys who arguably wrote one of the top 10 best business books of all time.
Just proof what can happen even when you don't necessarily know how it's supposed to evolve.
And that, I'm so glad you said that, because before I said, don't attach yourself to the outcome.
Right.
If you don't have clarity on what it is you want, fine. Then what you want is to get clarity. What you want is to surround yourself with people who inspire you. Yeah. Because what happens is when you surround yourself with the correct 5 people who are further ahead than where you are today, you will find a trail of breadcrumbs. And if you are more interested in them than trying to get them to be interested in you, you will pick those breadcrumbs up and you will find the next one and the next one and the next one, and doors open.
So for people who have no idea what they're even working towards, they don't even have the proverbial podcast idea, what types of mentors do you feel like they should be surrounding themselves with? If they don't know where they want to be 5 to 10 years, 5 to 10 months.
I've done this exercise in a training group of mine. If I asked every single one of you to take out a piece of paper and I want you to write down the 3 to 5 buckets of your life, what are the 3 to 5 areas that if you were to say my life is absolutely amazing, you'd be crushing it in those areas? And I can share with you, mine is my productivity company with Jay and Gary for the one thing, my podcast business, my relationships, which include my wife, my kids, my mentors, my friends, and then my personal well-being, which includes mental, physical, and spiritual health. Those are my 4 buckets.
Cool.
What are your buckets?
I would have probably separated them into like 6.
Okay.
Relationships, fitness. I was working on this yesterday, actually. Relationships, fitness, spirituality, emotional. I'm having trouble seeing the grid, but you get where I'm going.
I get it.
Yeah,
but the point
similar.
is every single person, if I looked you in the eye and asked you to name them off, you could at least name 2 to 3 buckets.
Totally.
Now, if I pick one of them at random, spiritual, what does it look like for you to be living an amazing spiritual life?
I think having a consistent meditation practice and just feeling more connected to everyone else and less just in my head, and more connected with something outside of myself, whether that's a spirit or that's like everyone else on the planet Earth, you know what I mean? Just something outside of myself. That to me feels spiritual. So
then it comes to applying the Jim Rohn quote. If you're the average of the 5 people you spend the most time with, who are your 5 for spirituality?
Right.
If spirituality is one of those buckets that you say you need help in, the bottom line is get clarity on what your buckets are. Identify the bucket that you really want to focus on first, true to the message of the one thing, narrow it down to 1. What's the one bucket you want to improve first? And then ask, who do my 5 need to be? What do they need to look like? What does an amazing financial life look like? What does an amazing professional life look like? What does amazing relationships, health, spirituality, wealth? What does that all look like? And then make sure that you actually have 5 in there that are where you want to be. Admittedly, I haven't read the one thing yet, but it's quickly rising to the top of my list. I know that probably pains you. Don't tell Jay. What I was going to ask is, do you feel like people often try and focus their energy on getting really fit,
also building the business, also trying to track the one, and you just cannot do all of that. And so they don't make progress in any, really.
That is just the truth of human nature. And this is why it's the surprisingly simple truth behind extraordinary results. Listen, I've got a lot of areas in my life that I need to work on. In fact, for years, I struggled to make more money, to have a better relationship with my wife, to get my health in check, to maintain my sanity, and through meditation. These were all major hot buttons of mine, yet I failed to make any progress. It wasn't until I moved to Austin to partner with Gary and Jay and to turn the one thing into a productivity company that I learned that you have to start by just choosing one. I first focused on the business, and I only focused on developing a power habit that would make everything else in my business easier or unnecessary. I formed that habit.
What was your habit?
It had to do with lead generation and just having focused time in the morning to do my most important work. Having a time block for that, because it's so easy to get into the office or to open your computer and check email, and all of a sudden you're in reactive mode and you're no longer doing your most important work. You're reacting to everyone else's agenda.
Totally, yeah.
I don't do that anymore. I don't check email in the morning. I get in and I've already identified if I can only do one thing today, what is the most important thing I can do to move my business forward? And I do it first. It's a habit. I don't even have to think about it anymore. Then I needed to focus on my marriage. Just 15 minutes of quality time with my wife every day where I'm not looking at my phone. My phone's not by me. We're not watching TV. We're just connecting.
Yeah.
It sounds sad that I had to narrow it down to that simple, but I did. Now it's a habit. Now my marriage has improved. Then I realized I was running around like a chicken with my head cut off. I really needed to get meditation under control. I needed to just meditate for at least 3 minutes a day. Now it's a habit.
Create the habit. Yeah.
Just create the habit. And now I do it every day. Now I'm focusing on my health, making sure that I'm watching what I'm eating every day because I let that get way out of control. Like instead of trying to tackle them all at once, I have narrowed them down and nailed them one at a time. And now they're power habits that have stacked.
Gotcha. And is that something that the book goes into, is the power of stacking those habits?
Nope. No, that's what's happened on the back end from me stepping in and quote unquote being the interesting character of the brand now and really living the book and documenting the journey.
Yeah.
We created the first thing I did was I created a course called Time Blocking Mastery, which shows you how to identify your one thing and make it a power habit that sticks. And then that's where you learn how to stack habits. And you know, I've had close to 500 people go through and we're seeing the transformation. It's crazy.
I love that. So going back just a little bit, for people who don't have a podcast or something where they can invite someone on and say,
Good.
I need help with
Good.
this, can you help me? How do they get that mentor-mentee relationship kicked off? Because you're asking for that person's time.
Sure. Thank you for bringing that back up.
Yeah.
Remember, folks, I didn't start the podcast with no mentors. I already had mentors. And they weren't just like, oh, my neighbor who I'm now calling a mentor. These were legit heavy hitters. It started by me being willing to drop my ego and get vulnerable. I attended this event where this guy was speaking, and he was talking about his story, how by late 20s, multimillionaire, early 30s, basically retired. He brought the cell phone to the United States, ran the largest sports agency in the world. The movie Jerry Maguire is based off of the firm he ran. Like, wow. Dude was ridiculous. Gets to the point where he's worth almost $100 million, flying around on private jets with all the celebrities, and he almost loses it all. Almost goes bankrupt, almost gets divorced, almost loses the relationship with his kids because he had lost his gratitude and empathy and had surrounded himself with the wrong people and the wrong ideas. It took losing almost $100 million and almost losing his family for him to wake up and realize that he had lost his way. I'm hearing this story right when I'm at rock bottom, when I'm more lost than I've ever been. And this quote is in the back of my mind going, well, I'm lost. He was lost. I have to know this man. But what do I say to a guy who's played at this level? I didn't know. But he stopped speaking, and all of a sudden it was like my brain was confused, but my heart was set. And it got me out of my chair, and I just start walking toward him without even thinking. And before I know it, his eyes meet mine, and I realize, showtime, Geoff, you got to say something.
Yeah. Shit's about to get real.
I'm trying to think, like, lost for words, and just almost effortlessly, I just relaxed. And I said, Dave, my name's Geoff Woods. First and foremost, thank you. I have been so lost and going through such a tough time. And for the first time, I'm hearing you speak, and I feel like I have clarity that I've never had before. I don't know what I can do to add value to you, but if you'd be willing just to spend 10 minutes with me, to give me some guidance, not only do I promise that I will take action, I promise I will get results, I will share in the success, and I will find a way to bring value to your life. Where do you live, and how can we make this happen? Now you hear the emotion in my voice because it's still real to me.
Yeah, because you were being authentic and genuine.
Yes. It doesn't matter what you've accomplished in your life. The moment you get real and you start to share your struggle, we as human beings on an innate level respond to one another. What do you think he said? He said yes.
Yeah.
I said, where do you live? He told me the neighborhood. He lived a half mile from my house. We were neighbors. And it turns out he had just moved to Orange County 2 weeks before me, and he had consciously, during a meditation, put out into the world that he was looking to find a young up-and-comer to mentor.
Wow.
And 2 weeks later, I approached with this. This is not a one-time thing. I have done this time and time and time again. And I've trained the people who follow the Mentee to do it time and time again. And it works. The reality is, and you'll hear me, I think episode 19, I formed a relationship with a guy named Jeff Hoffman. He was one of the billionaire founders of Priceline.com. You will point blank hear me ask him, Jeff, why in the world are you talking to me? You will point blank hear me in one of my episodes, ask Brendan Burchard, why the heck are you talking to me? The answer is always the same. Because at one time, I was where you were. And somebody reached back, grabbed my hand, and helped pull me forward. They didn't ask for money. They didn't ask for me to wash their car. They didn't ask for a back rub. All they asked for is that one day I pay it forward. And now I'm in the position where I have all the things I could possibly want, and all I want to do is leave a legacy. The biggest myth that I can bust for every single person here right now today is that being the mentee, you are not in an inferior position. In fact, you have all the power. Because you can approach the billionaires or the millionaires, or if whatever matters to you, the people who are playing at the top of their game, I guarantee you every single person is looking to leave a legacy. And just by you approaching, you are giving them the opportunity to leave that legacy. Definitely. If you're willing to take action.
Doing this on video is a new experience. You can see when I get emotional hearing how passionate you are about it.
Changed my life.
Yeah.
I mean, guys, at the time of this recording, a year ago, I was still in medical device sales. I was
California.
In California.
Wow.
I moved here November 1st, 2015. It's almost my 1 year anniversary. Today's October 25th that we're recording this. I've been here for less than a year. This is so fresh to me. But I wake up every day, I go into meetings with Gary Keller, who built the largest real estate company in the freaking world. And he's looking at me saying, here's this best-selling book, you be the face of it. Build a brand around this. Build a productivity empire. Go change the world. And he's giving me his playbook to do it. Like, you freaking kidding me?
Yeah. Man, Geoff, you're getting me. It's so, like, it makes me seriously emotional. I don't think I've cried on a podcast before because I just know that what you're saying is so true and so hard for people who are like at rock bottom now to see it. And it brings up a lot of like, I was where you were, just so miserable and like had no idea what to do. And then connecting with people that radically changed my whole life in less than a year, less than 3 months. You know, it's like, you can't, words don't even do it justice.
Now let's flip it. I hear your emotion. How grateful. What do you think those people who changed your life, who gave you their time, who just mentored you, they didn't ask for anything. They just wanted to see you succeed. How do you feel about those people?
Honestly, we're not close. These are people that I worked with in my life before the Bold Life Movement. And yeah, we are not close now, which is tough. I've never talked about that publicly, by the way.
But do you feel gratitude for those people?
Yeah, unending.
Unending. You feel positive for those people.
Yeah, despite our differences. Yeah, I mean, I owe everything that I've learned since them to them, whether they feel connected to it or not.
And now that you've started the Bold Life Movement, you've had the opportunity to be the mentor to other people.
Totally, yeah.
How has it felt to reach back now and grab the hand of somebody who is struggling? What is the reward? Even try to describe the reward of that.
You can't. That's why I told you when I was listening to your episode the other night where you had just come from an event where you met listeners of the show. It's like getting a tweet or an email or working with a client who's like, I just talked to my first client. It's unreal to hear the changes that people make in their life simply because of content that I put out there, or, you know, advice that I give them if they reach out.
Now, if you have to stack them together, the value you have received and the positive emotions you feel for the people who have mentored you versus the positive emotions you feel from seeing the success of the people that you have mentored, which is more valuable?
The latter, for sure. It's fulfilling.
Folks, that's why you're in the power position. Because right now, if you're one of those people who's at rock bottom, who's feeling down about yourself, who has limiting beliefs about your ability to surround yourself with those people, you've just heard from me, you've just heard from Kim, and you've heard from the guys that I run with. You are in the power position because you are giving us a chance to leave our legacy. And for that, we thank you.
Whew. Well, I don't properly know how to segue out of that, but something that I really did want to commend you for and ask you about was on your show, you don't hold back. I mean, you talk about your relationship with your wife in much greater detail than you have on this episode, and you've had her on the show. How did you make the decision to be transparent, not just with the business, but with your personal life? Because that's very brave.
That was the goal from day one. I knew I'm surrounding you've heard me name drop some of the people that I run with. Not many people get to do that. And I saw how fast my life was accelerating, and I knew I actually in my heart felt selfish, keeping it to myself. And I'm thinking, all right, if I want to go from employee to entrepreneur, nobody's ever actually documented the journey. Nobody's ever told the behind the scenes story of what it takes. And God, is it needed? Because today everybody thinks that they have to be the next Mark Zuckerberg. They have to be this startup CEO to live a big life. And the reality is you just don't. Most people are not destined to be number ones. And they miss tremendous opportunities because their ego's in the way. So I wanted to pull the curtain back and tell that story. And as I went through the podcast, recording episode after episode, there were times where I'm going, I'm really struggling with my wife. My marriage is actually falling apart. I can't record this. And it was as soon as I consciously thought I can't record this that I realized then I must. Because if I'm going through this, then I know somebody else is. Yeah. And I sat down with Amy and I stuck the recorder in front of us and said, tell people how it's affected our marriage, that I'm doing medical sales and starting this business on the side. And you hear her say, I can count the number of times that I have fallen asleep next to you or woken up next to you combined over the last year on 2 hands total.
Yeah.
You know, people don't share that. You hear me when my marriage is falling apart going to a mentor saying, my wife, that bitch, blah, 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 like blaming her. And you hear him whip out a freaking 2x4 and slap me across the face and say, it's you, bro. It's all you. This is the stuff that you need to hear.
Yeah. Yeah.
And
especially in this day and age when everything's a movie reel. And
it was through just that first time of me getting vulnerable and throwing something out there that I thought there's no way I could do it. That's when the audience came out of the woodwork and emailed me or commented on social media or whatever. Like that's when all the support came. I realized in that moment, people do not relate to you through your success. They relate to you through your struggle.
Yeah.
Which is how I can get on a stage at an event and tell the Dave story and completely lose my shit. Start bawling like a little baby and have the utmost confidence, because in that moment, when you look around the room, I have everyone.
Mm-hmm. They're
engaged and we're connected.
Geoff, I gotta say, you're taking me by surprise today. I did not know we were gonna go here emotionally.
Well, it's the stuff people need to see.
Yeah. I want to know, what is one thing that has really surprised you over this journey?
The entire journey, or since I've been here in Austin?
Either. Whatever speaks to you.
I'll answer both. Guys, I mean this with complete sincerity. We're the same. We're the exact same. I'm not on a different level than you. You're not on a different level than me. We're the exact same. And for me I all the time just, I'll have flashbacks where I'm at bottom again. Or sometimes I still feel like I'm there, and then it's like I wake up and actually smell the roses around me and realize how much I've done in such a short period of time. It took a lot of work. There was a lot of blood, sweat, and tears, but it wasn't hard. It was easy. Because I just, instead of focused on trying to swallow the whole elephant, I just woke up every single day saying, how do I eat one bite? How do I just take 5 minutes of action on my business?
Yeah.
10 minutes of action, 15 minutes of action, and it built and it built and it built. And all of a sudden I look up, I still pinch myself every day. I literally walk into meetings with a guy like Gary Keller and he's handing me his playbook on how to build a freaking empire, which he's done. Like, if you can't see, for those of you watching from my face, if you can't hear it in my tone, I'm still surprised.
And you're saying that from one of the offices, you know?
Yeah. I mean, I'm in the corporate headquarters right now. But the only thing I did differently is I made a commitment to take action every day. Rain or shine, pain or happiness, I fucking moved every day.
Yeah.
That's it.
Geoff, well, I have a few more questions, but before we wrap up, I know I could just sit here all day, I'm realizing. I've been trying to keep these to 30 minutes. But before I do wrap up,
don't worry about length. As long as the content's good, let it flow.
I know.
Because I guarantee you the people who are still listening are more hooked than they've ever been.
For sure.
And I say that because I know how I feel right now.
Yeah. Yeah, I'm very grateful for transitioning to video and getting to connect with you in this way. It feels really good.
Good idea.
I did want to acknowledge you though, it's a good segue from what you were just talking about. The thing that I had made a note to myself I wanted to acknowledge you for is your persistence, because not just having the idea to document the journey, but actually sticking with it, because I can only imagine how scary and vulnerable it must have been at times when things aren't taking off like you would have thought. And, one episode's not as fun as another episode. And
what if your employer finds out?
Right. All of these things, just sticking with it, I have to acknowledge you for that. And, we've talked about so many things that have come from just that today. So props.
Thank you. I appreciate it.
You're welcome. I also want to make sure that everyone knows where they can connect with you. We're talking about getting connected to people. So where can people reach out to you?
The podcast is called The Mentee. So I've been the Mentee, menteepodcast.com. TheOneThing.com is our website for the business I'm building. That's with the number one. You can email me, Jeff@TheOneThing.com. Like I'll give you my email.
Awesome.
And I do that because I recognize the reality is most of you won't even do a single thing with it. But there will be a select few of you that do. Those are the ones that are going to get results.
I recommend it. Every time I talk to Jeff, he blows my mind. 2 more questions for you. What does it mean to you to live a bold life? What does being bold mean to you?
I'll just speak from the heart and off the cuff. Bold means waking up every day and daring to do what you know you really should be doing, in spite of your fears, in spite of what your current peer group or friends may say. Your heart is clear on where you are going in this world. It's clear of your purpose. It's your mind that lacks the clarity. But make no mistake about it, your heart is like a 2-ton elephant. It is going to go where it wants to go. Your brain is like the rider on the elephant. There's nothing a little 80-pound boy can do to shift the energy or focus of that 2-ton elephant. So recognize that your heart is the elephant and you are the rider. And go on to the journey.
I like that. The last question I wanted to ask you, and maybe this has evolved over time since you started the podcast, but what would you say is your why?
Ooh, it is an evolving journey to clarity. I know that I am a teacher at heart. I have recognized that I have an ability to communicate effectively, articulately, and concisely. My why is really to empower people to reach inside themselves and make the changes that they deserve.
I love it. Geoff, thank you so much.
You're welcome.
Thanks again to Geoff Woods for joining me on this week's episode of The Bold Life Movement. If you like today's episode and you want to get more information, head to theboldlifemovement.com/046. And just in case you're viewing on YouTube, go ahead and drop me a comment. I'm still really excited hearing what you guys think about the new video format for the episodes. Also, stay tuned for next week because I have Michelle Poehler from the 100 Days of Fear Challenge coming on the show. Michelle is a super interesting young woman that I met at the World Domination Summit this past summer. And what I learned was that she decided that she was living her life abiding by her fears, letting them control her too much. And so she decided to set out on a challenge where for 100 days, she would go out and conquer one of her fears. It ended up picking up a lot of press, and now she's touring all over the world, speaking and providing motivation and inspiration for other people to go out and conquer their fears. So I'm really excited to have her on the show. She's super cool, and I can't wait to share her story with you guys. So I look forward to seeing you next week.